What is God's plan for me in 2024? What is God's plan for my life? How am I supposed to navigate this? And how oftentimes redirection can be God's protection. What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Garden Room Podcast. I hope y'all are doing good. I hope you're feeling good, having a great day. And if not, I hope your day continues to get better. We're going to jump right into today's episode. I am beyond excited for just today's topic when we're talking about redirection and what is God's plan for me in 2024? What is God's plan for my life? How am I supposed to navigate this? And how oftentimes redirection can be God's protection. And so if you've been wondering, what am I going to do with my life? If you've been questioning, God, what is your plan for me? Then this is the episode for you. And so real quick, before we get started, my name is Mari Thrower. If you're new here, and this is just a devotional podcast to really encourage you to just keep growing with God. And so I'm so thankful for all of you who have joined, especially recently, just being able to grow this community. I'm so humbled and so grateful for just the opportunity to share pieces of my life, things that I've learned, things that I'm growing through, things that God's been teaching me, and ultimately to just give him glory through all of that. And so getting into today's episode, we're going to go through Exodus chapter 13, verses 17 through 18. So we're going to be focusing on and talking about how God is leading the children of Israel. If you don't know this whole story, God has appointed Moses to help lead the children of Israel, God's chosen people, out of Egypt because they've been in bondage, been in slavery for hundreds of years. And God is like, I am going to make a way for my people to walk in freedom. And so I want to look at chapter 13, like I said, verse 17 through 18. And it says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, although that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt ready for battle. And you guys, as I was reading that, it really did just, a couple things honestly stood out to me, but it really did just kind of like captivate and really convicted my heart, because the first thing that really stood out to me was the fact that God could have led them down one road and it would have been a shorter pathway. However, he recognized that they were not ready for battle. He said they might change their minds. And as I was thinking about that and just recognizing how often God knows a much better pathway, a much better plan, a much better purpose in mind for me than I know, because when it comes down to just walking and going a long distance, this is a huge group of people. They are finally able to escape Egypt, and they're probably trying to do whatever it takes to get to their next destination as fast as possible. So when you're looking at all these different factors and you're taking these things into consideration, then you recognize, why would God take me down a different route than what I would choose? They all probably would have chose a much shorter pathway. They all probably would have just taken a path that was a little bit easier. However, God knew that even if they thought they were ready for battle, even if they thought they were ready to encounter the Philistines or whoever was waiting for them at that next stage, God was like, they're not ready for that. And if you read in the next couple chapters of Exodus, you probably will understand why, because there was a lot of complaining, a lot of things that went on that, they weren't ready for in the midst of the wilderness. And so yet alone a battle, as soon as you escape Egypt, they definitely probably couldn't have handled that. But in their minds, they're probably thinking, we can do this, we can handle this, we can take them on. However, God saw differently. And I think when we first encounter even just the initial redirection of a longer route, we don't want any part of that. We don't want to take the long way out. We live in a time where everything is so fast paced. We want the next thing as soon as possible, when we want it, how we want it. And taking the long way out the long way around seems like a much more devastating process, to be honest. And I'm speaking from experience, because I've had so many things in my life within the past couple of years where I've had to take a different direction than what I thought. And it's taken me longer than what I thought. But I have to keep humbling myself and recognizing maybe God is protecting me from something, or maybe he's protecting me from my own pride, thinking I can handle this and he knows it's going to crush me. And so I think having a mindset of humility is so important with that first initial redirection. And I don't know if you guys ever feel like this or have encountered this, but a lot of times when God is leading us down a different way, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that is where we have to learn how to trust him, because not only in phase 1 is he taking us down a pathway that's longer, so we have to practice patience. Then he takes us down a pathway that does not make sense in our human minds. It does not add up. It does not actually, come together the way that we thought it would. So then we have to learn how to trust God. We have to trust that where he's leading us down is with our best interests at heart. We have to trust that if we're walking in his way, we have to trust his plan. We have to trust his pathway and his purpose, and that he is able to see far beyond what we can. And when leading them down a pathway that does not make sense, then you start to question a whole lot of things of, did I make the right choice? Are we really trusting that God is going to show up for us? Are we really going to do this? And are we really going to walk this out in a way that God is calling us to? And I think sometimes when we already have to handle the patience of a different direction, then we also have to ask ourselves, are we willing to follow God anywhere? Regardless of where that ends up being, are we willing to follow him? Because where God was leading them seemed like a dead end. And when you go into those next couple scriptures and verses, you see that God ends up splitting the Red Sea. But none of them have ever seen that before. None of them have ever encountered something like that. Now, they saw God work a ton of miracles. And I feel like coming off of that, they had the faith to know, okay, if God is taking us down somewhere differently, taking us through the longer way around, and he's leading us to what seemed like a dead end, then some of them had to have the faith to know that he's going to do something. He's not just going to leave us here to die. And that takes us looking back a lot of times at the things that God has already done, because it's hard to remember that God is going to come through for you in the moment when it seems like you are facing what looks like a dead end, when it seems like it's the end of the road, the end of the line. I don't know how God is going to make this work. I know I can't make it work. I know I can't do anything about this, but I followed God here, so I have to trust that he's going to come through. And when we start to look back at all the different ways God has come through for us, all the different ways that God has known better than we've known, all the different ways that God having his hand over our life and having our best interests at heart, not just what we want, but what we need, then we can see that God's actually never failed. God actually is so good. God is so powerful that if he brought me through that last thing, he can bring me through this again. And that should reignite our faith. That should reignite our trust in him. That should reignite our obedience in him. Because that's then the third thing you have to consider. Once you have the patience and once you have the trust, then you still got to walk in obedience. And that is sometimes the hardest part of really letting our faith be matched with our actions. Because it says in his word, faith without works is dead. You can believe God all day long, but if you are not willing to take those steps, then you're not able to see the life that God is able to bring out of a situation. It's going to stay dormant. It's going to stay stagnant. If you're not ready to move where God is trying to move you to, then you're going to find yourself in the same position. And so I think a lot of us start having those questions of, well, God, I thought I would be married by this age. God, I thought I'd be done with school by this time. God, I thought I would have this job. God, I thought. All these questions that a lot of us are asking in our young adulthood years of trying to figure things out. And we had this timeline, we had this roadmap, and then we're still trying to figure out, God, what are you trying to do with my life right here, right now, in this year of 2024? What is your plan? But when we hit that dead end, then we should be encouraged to know that God may be working a miracle in your situation. And I don't want to miss any of God's miracles. I don't know about you guys, but it is so easy to brush past so many things because we think our plan is better, we think our way is better, or we're so fixated on just how it should have been. There's so many times I've missed so many just miraculous things in my life because I still mentally was missing the miracle. I was mentally thinking about what I was missing out on if things were to happen my way. But God is like, look at what I've done. Look at what I'm doing, and focus on my way versus your own. And that takes so much humility. But it also takes us saying, I'm willing to commit to whatever God is doing with boldness and confidence. And Moses had that. He had that staff. He had people in his back corner, and he said, all right, God, you're clearly going to do something here because we are at a sea. And now we have a whole army behind us. We were avoiding one army, and now we got a whole other one behind us. What are we going to do? But he acknowledged that God was going to do something. And I think that is where a lot of our mindsets have to be of, it may not have a whole lot to do with us. And I think year after year, I constantly was trying to plan my life on what is the best thing for Mari? What is the best thing I could do to make the best of my life, my way? And would sprinkle God on top and be like, and give God the glory for it. But right now, I am now in a situation and now in a mindset and a headspace to say, what is God trying to do with this space, with my life? What is he trying to work on in 2024 in me and through me that is going to bless other people, or that's going to make an impact, or that's just going to give him glory that nobody sees? I think so many times we want something that is going to just impact the world and just be super great and grand. But I really had to shrink myself down and say, those things are good and they can be helpful to so many people. But if I'm really just trying to make a name for either myself, or if I'm really just trying to give myself a pat on the back for just doing good things and just looking like I have this put together life, what really is the point of all of that? Just to, at the end of the day, say I'm giving God glory, but deep down inside, I just wanted to feel like a good person. That just is not cutting it for me anymore. It used to. That used to be what I kind of lived for, was like, as long as I am like checking off all these good girl boxes, then I should feel good. But if God's not in that truly, not just because I say he is, if he is not in my direct pathway of life and I'm not actually following after him, I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't want it anymore. It's not real. And I think that's what we're all desiring right now in this time and age, is just the genuineness and the realness of something that's so much bigger than just trying to build this life platform that we could just show off to other people. And so I want to encourage you guys, when you are trying to figure out what is next, when you're trying to figure out what am I doing, when you're trying to figure out, okay, God, I am either a senior in high school, or I just graduated college, or I just got my house and my job, whatever that stage of life that you're in, when you are trying to appease and trying to please God with your life, then I want to remind you that God has already set a plan for your life. But the bigger question that I had to ask myself is, am I willing to walk in it? Am I willing to walk in whatever different pathway that God has for me? And am I willing to trust him? Am I willing to have the patience? Am I willing to have the obedience that it takes to see him operate in the way that he desires more than I do? And you will find in the midst of that, you guys, because I used to be so worried, like, what if me and God are on two separate pages? But when you keep walking with God, he really does change the desires of your heart. And that has been the most rewarding thing, to see that the things that I used to want, I don't want them as much anymore. Not that they're bad things. They just don't fulfill me the way that they used to, or the way I thought they would have. And it is such a joy to recognize that even though you're scared, even though you don't know what the next step is going to look like, even when it looks like it's a dead end, you see that walking with God is that dead ends are a gateway to new beginnings. And that is something that has been so refreshing, something that has really just revived my walk of faith with the Lord, is to be open to what's new. If you want to see God work something new in your life, you need to be open to maybe something old getting tossed out to the side and something that's familiar to you just being put in a different place. And that doesn't mean God may not circle you back around to a previous thing or a previous chapter, but you just have to learn to be open to what he is doing when it comes down to going down a different direction. Because a lot of times, as we can see here, he was protecting them. And he knows our mindsets. He knows that we'll run back the minute we face a real challenge that causes us to start being worried or scared. We'll run back to what's comfortable really fast. And I don't want to be the first person to admit that, but I will be. I've done that so many times where it is so easy to want to run back to what makes us feel safe, what makes us feel good, even though that's not producing the growth, and really miss out on giving God glory for doing something new. I don't want to miss a Red Sea moment in my life because I wanted to take the shorter pathway because I thought I could handle it. And then the minute I couldn't, I wouldn't run back to God. I would just run back to what's comfortable. I want to fully trust, fully be obedient, and fully walk in the plan that God has for my life. And sometimes that plan, as we can see, we're reading this back and it's easy to see that God was, redirecting their situation and was protecting them, but they probably didn't know that in the moment. And sometimes we have to recognize we're not always going to know everything. And that takes, like I said earlier, humility. You got to check your pride and be like, it's okay if I don't know everything. I'm just going to be obedient in this next step and trust that God is going to open up a door and God is going to make a way. And he still is right here with us today. The same God that did that is the same God that is in your situation, same God that's in my situation. And he is not just trying to just work and do things that make us look good, feel good, or whatever else. I don't always want to just say God's going to come through in the way that you are trusting and believing, because sometimes he has a different plan in the way that we think he's going to come through. I can't promise or guarantee that if you pray hard enough and if you read more and if you do all these things that God is going to make a way in the way that you think he will, but he will make a way, and he will do so in knowing that it's going to produce the most growth and perseverance and glory and goodness in your life, because he loves you. I know that for a fact. He loves you and genuinely wants what's best for you. So believe in that, trust in that, and know that today. And when you're trying to figure out what your plans are for 2024, what your life is going to look like, what your purpose is, keep referring back to God's words. Keep having patience, keep trusting in him, and walk in obedience, especially when God is redirecting your steps, and know that his plan for your life is going to constantly keep piecing together, piece by piece. And one day you will be able to look back and say, look at the picture that God was trying to paint in my life. And because I was able to have faith in him, I got to see what he was doing. And when I look back at my life, I can do nothing but give God glory because of that. So as we wrap up today's episode, you guys, be encouraged by that. Know that God is already ahead of you and he's making a way in your situation. And as always, I'm praying for you guys. I'm here for each one of you. Please feel free to send me prayer requests or even leave a comment below of things you guys are going through, things you guys want me to talk about, things that would be helpful to just hear and focus on throughout your journey and your walk with the Lord. I am growing and I'm learning just as much as you guys are. So I'm so thankful for this community and the opportunity to connect more with each of you. But I hope you guys have a great day. I am so thankful. And until the next episode, keep growing with God. Bye, guys.